I've been a member of the parliament for many years, and I was the chief lead negotiator on the regulation called the Digital Services Act, which is the legislation that kind of guides what we allow on platforms or not. The vision behind the DSA is to make sure that what is illegal offline should also be illegal online. We need to protect freedom of speech, but we also need to protect our democracies. And I think that we did it in a clever way.
What Mark Zuckerberg said, that we institutionalize censorship, you think is wrong?
It's completely wrong. I think that Mark Zuckerberg is trying to blame EU for something where he should blame American politicians instead. When Facebook moderate, when they close accounts, they are doing it on the basis of their community standards. And the community standards, they are so narrow. The DSA is so wide. We have much more opportunities.
This is like why I called also today in my speech for the Elon Musk to come, Mark Zuckerberg to come here, is because you are saying exactly the opposite that Mark Zuckerberg say, that we institutionalize censorship. And I'm curious to hear the arguments and how do they support this. So we need to start the conversation. I'm very excited today because we are going to talk about freedom of speech, and we have one of the most qualified people from all the parliament to talk about it. Why you are one of the most qualified, and maybe introduce yourself as well. And thank you for coming here.
You're welcome. My name is Christel Schaeldemose. I'm a member of the European Parliament elected from Denmark. I've been a member of the Parliament for many years, and I was the one who was the rapporteur or the chief lead negotiator on the regulation called the Digital Services Act, which is the legislation that kind of guides how we, what we allow on platforms or not. So that's why I know something about this topic.
Okay, not something, a lot.
A lot, yeah.
So let's, first of all, my goal here is not to really have a debate.
No.
It's to kind of understand.
Okay, fair enough.
How you did things and when the Digital Service Act started and how many years and what was the conversation kind of looking like and how did you form the opinion and kind of explain us the Digital Act. And
all right.
And maybe in a different one, we can have a debate about freedom of speech, but we cannot have a debate if we don't know exactly the data.
So you just interrupt me and ask question, and if I say something you don't understand, please let me know.
Don't worry.
But the thing is, it started long way back. We haven't been regulating the platforms particularly much in EU. We had the e-commerce directive, so e-commerce, so if you're shopped online, but you know, it's still a rather new thing in EU, and we didn't regulate it. So back in the times, we decided that the platforms, they did not have any responsibility for the content, for what happened online. And it was a part because we wanted it to be, you know, new, innovative, and...
What time we're talking now? What?
Back in year 2000.
2000?
We had the e-commerce directive. So then at a certain time in the last mandate...
What was the time that you came first as an MEP?
2006.
2006, so she's been here about 20 years.
Almost, yeah.
Wow.
Not completely, but almost. And then, you know, at a certain time we started discussing...
And the mandate, guys, for everyone is 5 years, so she's been re-elected 4 times. And
Many
this
times,
is the 5th time.
Yeah.
Continue.
So, we had a discussion about things, what happened online, and you know, the platforms, the social media started being bigger, and what could we do? How could we make sure that what took place online were okay? How could we do that? So in the last mandate, we decided to discuss what to do because we knew that the EU Commission might come up with a new tool, a new law. So we discussed, should we revise the old legislation called the e-commerce directive, or should we have a complete new law? And to make a long story short, we have a new law, and it is called the DSA.
It was the last 5 years that this was...
More or less, yeah. Of course, we had, before that, we also had some discussions, but it really speeded up the process in the last mandate.
And in what committees the conversation took place? Well, committees is how we divide the parliament, how we do legislation.
Yeah, and that's normal in the most parliaments. You have committees where a fewer numbers of members are discussing. And we had several committees, because that's also sometimes a little bit frustrating here in the Parliament. We have many committees, so many committees wanted to be a part of it. We had the Internal Market and Consumer Protection Committee, and that committee is the one I'm a member of, and that committee became the lead of the Digital Services Act.
The acronym, what is it?
IMCO.
IMCO.
Yeah.
Okay. IMCO.
But we also had the LIBE committee, the civil.
It's about the rights of the people, basically.
They were also involved, but also the industry committee, the ITRA committee, because they have innovation and the broader aspects of them.
Three committees played a big role.
No, even more. That's sometimes so complicated here. Also the jury, the legal committee.
But I don't understand how. So you were responsible to be the rapporteur for the whole file.
Yeah.
And you were responsible to coordinate all the people from all the committees.
Yeah. So what we did is that we, after a lengthy process in the parliament to decide who should be responsible, the IMCO committee became the lead committee. We were responsible for making sure that we talked with the other committees. They made opinions to IMCO, and then we had a vote so that we found out what is the parliament's position. But I was the leading negotiator for the whole of that process. And once we decided the content, what the parliament...
Which means the leading negotiator means that taking into everyone's opinion and try to
find compromises,
and just make one text that is that everyone agrees.
Exactly.
And then that will be voted.
And then we had a vote in the parliament. And after that vote, then we also...
How much influence you had personally, you think?
Well, honestly, I think that it's, you're never alone. You cannot do anything alone. You have to make sure that you have your backing of the group. I'm a member of the Socialist group, the S&D group, and I needed to have a majority. So I always had to talk to others and find the right balances. But that's, what politics about is to negotiate.
So it was a lot of the time, just out of curiosity, it was a lot of the times a communication between you and your group on what you should do about. So you basically represented the group, not your ideas.
No, well, I started making a draft report saying, what do I think the law should be about? But we also, we had a step before that. The parliament made an own initiative report. So from start with a full blank paper, we started saying what would we recommend for the EU Commission that should be in the new law.
Yes, because we'll explain, the Commission, we in the Parliament, we don't propose legislation. The Commission proposed legislation.
Yeah, and then we amend it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we made a proposal, kind of how do we want this to look like?
Exactly. And this is very important because here the Commission could read where is the majority constellation, what is the concerns of the Parliament, what is important to put in. They never ever do everything we say, but they do listen and read. And this job was done by also a present member of the parliament called Alex Saliba from Malta. I don't know if you know him, but he was leading the initiative report in IMCO and took in all things. So already here we had an idea about what the S&D group, the EPP group, the Renew group, and all the groups had of thoughts. But I made a draft report, and in that draft report, it is also possible for an individual rapporteur to say, no, I think this is more important than this. So of course it's a combination of that you represent a group and you need to have a majority, but also you have your own ideas. And one of the things that I really wanted to make sure was that when you shop online, Amazon or Temu or whatever, that they should be more responsible for the goods sold online. That was what I tried to get into the law.
So you tried for the social media platforms to be more responsible themselves for the content.
But the DSA...
You want to get... Maybe we wait to get into it a bit, to what you propose and what is your ideas
let's
and
wait.
all this stuff.
Because that's...
let's talk a bit about the process. You drafted the report and it was compromised by other groups and the amendments of other members of the European Parliament, and then you send it to the European Commission. This is what we think should be done. Yeah,
well, I didn't draft that report. That was another MEP, but I participated. And then that draft report was sent, the voted through report, initiative report was sent to the EU Commission. The EU Commission read it. Then at a certain time, and they had a public consultation with companies and member states, etc. And then they came up with a proposal. That proposal was called the Digital Services Act. And once that proposal was sent to the Parliament, The Parliament decided which committee should be the lead committee. IMCO became the lead committee. In IMCO, we decided which group should be responsible for leading the negotiations. It became my political group, S&D. And I became...
So S&D led the conversation about
the S&D led the conversation, and I was the member of the S&D who led that negotiation. So it was a very lengthy, complicated...
So you took the most important... It was not about the draft that we sent to the committee. It was actually what Commission has sent us after, and you took the report and tried to amend it and make it...
Yeah, because that would be... the proposal that EU Commission sends is the proposal for the law, not just an initiative report having a lot of wishes, but the law that would end up being obligations for companies afterwards. So that law came into the proposal for that came into the Parliament, and I took the lead of amending that so that the Parliament, because we are lawmakers. So in the end, we will have to adopt the proposal, but we
not always. We sometimes write reports that are not laws, but yes.
But true, we are making resolutions and a lot of other things as well. I know. But once we have proposal for laws or acts in place, then we amend it and try to improve it so that we can support it. Because at a certain time, the Commission proposes laws. They make 2 copies, one to the European Parliament and one to the European Council. In the Council, we have the ministers representing the member states. The Parliament represents, the political groups of the EU. And at a certain time, the Council and the Parliament sits down and negotiate.
You are describing the trialogue between the Commission, the Council, and the European Parliament.
But those who are adopting the law is the Parliament and the Council. But the Commission is there, and that's why it's called a trialogue. But they don't have, they don't vote. At that time, they're just, giving advices because they wrote the proposal for the law.
It was the initiative.
But they're not adopting it. The adoption takes place in the Council and in the Parliament.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How much time it took you to make this report in the Parliament?
We did it in record time.
Which is,
from the very beginning, when the proposal of the law came out, I think that was in the beginning of 2020. When the law was finally, it sounds long time, but when the law was finally adopted, we were in 2022.
Oh, that's fast for the European Union standard.
It is in fact fast. And then even already a year after, the law entered into force.
It was implementation in 2023.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
First part of it, at least.
Let's start talking a bit. Okay, so you had an idea about what you wanted to put in, and also what you wanted to make it about. What was your vision about disinformation and all this stuff? But also, I'm curious to know, you sat with the trialogue with the Council. What was their agenda? What they were trying to push for?
Well, we had many...
By the way, this is super interesting.
Yeah, but thank you. And I think so too. And this is about the core of our work, trying to really improve things and make it better for companies and citizens and democracy, etc. But we had a lot of interesting ideas. We wanted, we had the idea that we wanted to protect freedom of speech. But at the same time, we also wanted to make sure that the platforms didn't just earn money on us, but also were responsible in the way they, adjusted their algorithms. So we had lengthy discussions about how to make this happen, because we didn't want to compromise freedom of speech, but we wanted to make the platforms, responsible. So what we did in the end was that we said, well, the posts you and I put on our social media, they shouldn't be responsible for those. But how they use what we put on social media, they should be responsible for. Said differently, the algorithms, the system behind what you see in your feed, the recommendation systems, etc., they should be responsible. And if they didn't make sure that it didn't
They should be responsible for what? For hate speech and disinformation and child abuse and all this stuff.
For the impact of the algorithms. So,
So the legislation was not about this. Is disinformation, information, and all this. It was that they need to take responsibility.
Well, it was. I mean, we had the legislation to make sure that we had, we wanted to protect users. We wanted to protect democracy. We wanted to avoid foreign interference. We wanted to make sure that the public health of citizens were not compromised. So we had many ideas about this, but we wanted to do it in a way where you and I could still speak freely. So we didn't say that, for instance, Meta should be responsible for my post, what I post on my social media, Instagram or Facebook. But we wanted them to be responsible if they, multiplied my content and it had a negative impact, then they should be responsible, because if it had a negative impact on society, they should be responsible. But we are also saying, and this is a little bit complex.
If they haven't, where do you draw the line on the negative impact, and who is to judge?
Very good question, and you asked it in the plenary, and you did not get answer. But now I will give you the answer, because we make a law with a vision, with some wordings, and what we don't want to happen for society. But then it's up to the enforcer of the law to judge, or not even to judge, but to enforce the law, saying this is correct or this is not correct. And ultimately, if let's say X is not happy with the ruling of the EU Commission, who is responsible for enforcing, they can go to the European Court of Justice. So ultimately, it's the courts that decides what is up and down, but they do it on the basis of our regulation. But I don't want to be the one who say this is legal or this is not legal, because I'm not in a capacity to say that. But I can say the vision behind the DSA is to make sure that what is illegal offline should also be illegal online. We need to protect freedom of speech, but we also need to protect our democracies. So we try to find a balance. And I think that we did it in a clever way, because we have not said that we did not decide on content. So we didn't harmonize rules for content in EU. So you can have laws about what is illegal in Germany, that could be legal in Denmark. So we don't harmonize that. It's still up to the member states to decide what is hate speech, for instance. But if there is hate speech and it is illegal in Germany, then X has to adapt to that. And they have to get rid of the illegal content.
So what Mark Zuckerberg said, that we institutionalize censorship, you think is wrong?
It's completely wrong. Can I say something about that? Because in the United States, now the DSA is giving this kind, very broad options for platforms. We are having, some obligations and rules, but, that's so broad. The way Facebook acted in the United States, because of their regulation there, is like this. They use their community standards in a very narrow way. There are lots of room for maneuver in EU for Facebook. So I think that Mark Zuckerberg is trying to blame EU for something where he should blame American politicians instead.
But let's take a bit the side of the companies. Isn't it very, very difficult for them? Millions of posts are being uploaded every minute, every couple of minutes. So how they are supposed to moderate and do all this stuff? It's very complicated. So
it is. But they do, and they do much more than we are obliging them to do. So,
because they're afraid that we're going to fine them billions of dollars.
No, I don't. Yeah, but that's their argument. But that's not the case, because we have a lot of, there is a lot of room for this. What we're saying in EU.
But there is not. We find them. That's the.
No, we haven't fined them on the DSA yet. We haven't fined any company on the DSA yet. What we have fined is some of the big companies about the GDPR, for instance, when they have harvested our data in an illegal manner. Then they have been fined, but it's not under the DSA. So what Mark Zuckerberg said, for instance, is that they use filters to help them, because they also think that, he said that there's a lot of illegal content also, and they wanted to get rid of that
terrorist child abuse, and we are all agree that this needs to be censored.
They are monitoring that. That's fine. But in the DSA, we are saying it's only when they are notified that they have an obligation. And then they have to react.
When they are notified?
Yeah, I mean, for instance, if there's something illegal in a Danish law, and therefore they have to remove it, then the Danish police, it's not allowed in Denmark to share pictures without consent. And we have had several cases where young women has been gotten their pictures shared illegally, very private pictures, and then the police has been involved, and they ask Meta to get rid of that, and then they have to do it. But they should also, if there is a systemic risk that these things happen, Meta needs to put in place some measures. We're not saying what, but we are saying that they need to do it. Also on disinformation, if there is a risk that disinformation is spread, then they have to do something. What they do?
Disinformation is spread. That's the confusion. I think disinformation is the gray line here.
Disinformation is very often from foreign countries, third countries. Russia, for instance. Russia want sometimes to create division in EU. So they spread some informations that are not true. Can I give you an example? Maybe that's easier. Do you remember the case about France and the bedbugs? It was a huge story in many medias.
No, I don't. But it's okay.
A few months ago, in last summer, there was a big story in European news about bedbugs. And every French hotel had a problem, and they had even bedbugs in public transport, and that's not nice. And then looking into this story, apparently it was Russian, or at least foreign interference, trying to cause confusion, making people afraid, etc. So apparently this was spread because of some foreign interference and foreign countries making stories in France about this.
Well, the foreign interference is an interesting argument. Like, where do you draw the line on foreign influence and foreign interference? Like, a lot of the times, I personally think that we shouldn't censor.
No, but this was not censored. This is just an example of
But we
countries.
didn't censor Russian social media, like Sputnik and some stuff. So how are these being censored under the DSA?
Sputnik is not under DSA, but we.
So I'm curious to understand and also I'm curious to understand how do we censor stuff in Europe? Is that really, how do we censor?
But we don't. But we really don't censor things, in EU. But I mean, on Sputnik, for instance, there has been a discussion. On that, the EU Commission took some, measures. They made some measures to make sure that they couldn't be displaced in Europe. But I don't know so much about that. I know more about the DSA.
So it's not under the DSA?
No, that was not under the DSA. It was a decision from the European Commission to close down Sputnik and Russia Today because of foreign interference.
So, for example, when we see posts, like, for example, so this was before COVID, right? So it was after COVID that the DSA was.
It was after COVID.
Applied.
Or it was, in fact, during the COVID that we negotiated it. Yeah.
So, this is like why I called also today in my speech for the Elon Musk to come, Mark Zuckerberg to come here, is because you are saying exactly the opposite that Mark Zuckerberg say. They are saying that also Elon Musk, that it will institutionalize censorship. And I'm curious to hear the arguments and how do they support this and all this stuff. So we need to start the conversation. Maybe there is some stuff in the DSA Act that they can improve and they can.
Yeah, but maybe not. But
But
I think that it's also important, I think, to understand the situation in the United States at the moment. At a certain time, Mr. Trump threatened, apparently, Mr. Zuckerberg with jail. And of course, he became afraid, I guess. So he changed the policy of Meta to comply with, the political climate in the United States.
We don't know if he threatened him or the previous. He said that the previous government threatened him. So, like, I'm just saying his words here. He said that the previous government threatened him, and they were calling him to censor stuff, about the story of the Hunter Biden laptop, and also about COVID, to censor some stuff that were factually true. So about COVID, for example, they forced him to censor that the vaccines have side effects. We're talking about millions of posts, but you're saying this was not the case in Europe.
No, I mean, no, it wasn't. We have, I mean, the COVID was from 2020.
Yeah,
and we came
was
out
after the
the DSA
but,
was not in place at that time.
Just to summarize stuff to understand, so you are saying that it's up to the member states to decide what is hate speech and disinformation.
Yeah, well, the content, and we haven't harmonized what is illegal and what is legal content-wise in the EU. We have some terrorist laws, but besides that, we haven't. So hate speech we don't have a common European law on hate speech, for instance. So it is up to the individual member states, Cyprus, Denmark, Germany, France. They can have different laws. So Facebook or X will only be obliged to get rid of illegal stuff in Denmark on the basis of Danish legislation, in Germany on the basis of German legislation.
How each country defines freedom, how each country defines disinformation. One thing in my country, Cyprus, can be considered disinformation, and one thing in Denmark can be considered not disinformation.
Yeah, on that, we also have some, code of conducts and things in the European Union where we have a common, understanding.
So not.
But in the DSA, we have not harmonized what that is. So the content, the DSA is not a content law. It's about when things are illegal, how should you remove it? When things possess a systemic risk to society, for instance, public health, young people's mental health, for instance, then what should they put in to mitigate the risk of that? That is what we're doing in the DSA. We're not saying what is freedom of speech and what is not.
Okay. My goal, again, was not to attack or just to understand.
No,
so
and
I said some of my thoughts just to push back to have an understanding on this stuff. So we need more conversation. We need about this. We need to understand exactly what the DSA is, because here in the parliament today, I'm not saying, but it was a debate. Like half of the parliament was saying that we're censoring everyone and like disinformation and hate speech, which I agree with them. I'm on that side, but not everyone. But we're censoring a lot of stuff. And half of the parliament was against that. We said everything is good and we need to censor disinformation and all this stuff. That was the debate today, and it was confusion. And I understand that you think. Maybe you also think that it was a bit not on the essence of we didn't talk about the essence of the things today. It was not a lot of people are very informed about this. So
you're right, and that's very often the case about debates in the EU Parliament. We speak, in our own corners, and I'm not really sure that we are wiser after the discussion. But this is a very interesting conversation, and I think it's interesting also to see what we can do to understand this more in depth. When Facebook make things, when they moderate, when they close accounts, they are doing it on the basis of their community standards, and the community standards, they are so narrow. The DSA is so wide. We have much more opportunities. We are not, in fact, in EU saying that Meta has to make fact checking, but we're saying that if there is a risk that disinformation and misinformation is spread, then they have to do something to risk mitigate. So fact checking, could be one tool.
Yeah, like we're not, community notes and all this stuff.
If that works, that could also be a tool. We are not specific.
You are not forcing them the way that they will moderate.
But we say that they have to risk mitigate if there is a risk that is systemic.
But it's a good step forward to try new different things like community notes, and now Meta is a.
But do you think do you think that's a good tool?
Well,
community notes.
As I understand social media, because you cannot leave millions of posts not checked. But the community needs to check them, because we have millions of people already using this platform. So if you have a mechanism to crowdsource the work from the community, that a lot of people will be more than happy to do it. Is how Wikipedia works and all this stuff. I think it's possible, but maybe with AI and all this stuff. But we need to start having a conversation about this to be able to find the solutions. And it's a good step forward to try these things. So
I think definitely that could definitely be a tool. We also have to check whether it works in a good manner. I like, for instance, Wikipedia. I use it myself a lot when I have to check. But I still have, this a little. I also need to be a little bit critical sometimes towards the content. And then it's always good to check up against several sources if you want to make sure what is up and what is down. But I definitely think that community notes could be one of many tools.
It's interesting because it's more information in a way, because it gives you context on what you saw. So it gives more information to people.
But you can also end up in rabbit holes where you kind of
nothing is perfect. Also with everything. So this is but they are knocking to me that we are running out of time. But this was a good first conversation to understand kind of the history and how the DSA came to place. And we can do more in the future, more in-depth conversation on what the solutions, what are some problems that are appearing. And I will start an investigation personally to understand what actually is being censored in Europe, because we know in the United States people came out with stories, but I don't know in Europe, so we need to find out.
I've heard several things also for European citizens that has been censored, but not. The thing is that they think that it is based on European laws. But very often it's based on the community standards from Facebook, based on the situation in the United States.
So they can be a lot more relaxed, that you are saying,
I think that the Facebook could be more relaxed. Can I give you another just brief example? You can cut it.
We never cut anything.
No, okay. Anyway, but we have in Denmark a famous author. He made a book about the 70s in Denmark, and we had very big freedom. And for instance, we saw he had a picture on the front side of his book with naked ladies. And that was censored by Facebook because those pictures had women with nipples. And that was censored, but that's not, in Denmark you would never ever censor this kind, but the Americans did. So he couldn't sell his book without having, to do things. But that could be seen as if Europe is censoring, but we are not. It was because of the community standards of Facebook that it was censored. So we need to dig into this, but please do not hesitate to come back, because I would also like to learn if there is something that is not done in a correct manner on the basis of the law that I was leading on, because I would like to know.
I'm very excited. Thank you for this. This was very beautiful. This was very insightful. I love you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for watching. Bye-bye.